Rain. Footsteps. Iron gates opening. You're shaking. I'm not. Everyone does the first time they enter this house. Then why bring me here? Because tonight you stop being a worker and become a wife. Excuse me. You heard him. The marriage is already arranged. You can't just decide my life. A low, calm voice cuts in. I already have. Beat. Look at me, girl. I have a name. Say it. Nyara Brooks. Good. Remember it. Tonight Seoul will. Thunder cracks overhead. The gates close behind her with a metallic clang. Wait. What do you mean tonight? The ceremony begins in 2 hours. I never agreed to marry anyone. Your signature was unnecessary. The contract was signed 3 days ago. By who? Silence. Then. By the only person who could afford to save your aunt's life. If you're hooked already, hit that like button and subscribe, because what happens next will leave you speechless. Let's get into it. Nyara Brooks stood frozen in the entrance hall of the Baek Jun estate, rain dripping from her braids onto the polished marble floor. The man who'd just spoken those words stood 15 feet away, hands clasped behind his back, dressed in a black suit that probably cost more than her entire year's salary. He was older, much older, with silver threading through his dark hair and lines around his eyes that spoke of decades she hadn't lived yet. But it wasn't his age that made her chest tighten. It was the absolute certainty in his posture. The way everyone in the room seemed to hold their breath when he moved. Chairman Baek Jun-tae. She'd heard the name whispered during her first week in Seoul. Never spoken aloud. Never directly. Just hushed tones and averted eyes whenever someone mentioned the chairman. She'd assumed he was some corporate executive. Maybe a politician. She'd been catastrophically wrong. I need you to explain, Nyara said, forcing her voice steady even as her hands trembled. From the beginning. Because I came here for a housekeeping job. Not whatever this is. Jun-tae's aide, a sharp-faced man in his 40s named Seo Min-kyu, stepped forward with a leather portfolio. Miss Brooks. 3 weeks ago, your Aunt Lorraine was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer. The treatment she requires costs approximately $400,000. You have $1,700 in your bank account. Nyara's breath caught. How do you? 2 weeks ago, you applied for 12 different loans. All rejected. Min-kyu's voice was clinical, detached. 1 week ago, you searched for experimental trials. There were none available in her condition. 4 days ago, you received an email offering domestic work in Seoul with a signing bonus of $10,000. You accepted within 3 hours. Each word felt like a surgical cut. Precise. Exposing. That email was from you, Nyara whispered. The treatment began yesterday, Min-kyu continued. Your aunt is currently at Seoul National University Hospital under the care of Dr. Han Ji-woo, one of the world's leading oncologists. Her prognosis has improved from 3 months to potentially 2 years. All expenses covered. Indefinitely. The floor seemed to tilt beneath Nyara's feet. Why? Jun-tae finally moved, taking 3 measured steps closer. Not close enough to touch, but close enough that she could see the flecks of amber in his dark eyes. Because I needed someone who would say yes to an impossible situation. And you, Miss Brooks, were already living in one. You manipulated me. The words tasted like ash. I provided an option you didn't have. By lying. By offering salvation. His voice remained level, almost gentle. Your aunt is alive because of a decision I made. The cost of that decision is a marriage. To me. Tonight. Nyara laughed. A sharp, bitter sound that echoed in the cavernous hall. You're insane. I'm 20 years old. You're what, 60? 61. You could be my grandfather. And yet you're still standing here. Jun-tae tilted his head slightly. You haven't run. You haven't screamed. You're calculating. Weighing options. That's why I chose you. He was right, and Nyara hated him for it. Because even as rage and fear collided in her chest, her mind was already working through the mathematics of survival. Her aunt was dying. Was already getting treatment that would bankrupt 3 generations of her family. Treatment that was happening now, while Nyara stood in this impossible moment. What do you get out of this? She demanded. Why me? Why any of this? Jun-tae glanced at Min-kyu, who produced a tablet, and turned it toward Nyara. On the screen was a sprawling family tree, branching and complex. Red circles marked several names. Red crosses struck through others. The Baek family controls 17% of South Korea's private security sector, Jun-tae explained. Contracts worth billions. For 30 years I've maintained that control. But I'm aging. And my nephew, Baek Sung-ho, has decided it's time for new leadership. So, by Korean law and family tradition, succession requires either direct lineage or marriage into legitimacy. Sung-ho has neither. I have the latter, as of tonight. Nyara stared at him. You need a wife to keep your empire. I need a wife who exists outside the existing power structures. Jun-tae's gaze didn't waver. Every woman in Seoul's elite circles is connected to someone. Family, business, political alliances. Sung-ho could threaten any of them, manipulate them, use them as leverage. But you? You're invisible to his network. An American. No connections. No vulnerabilities he can exploit. Except my aunt, who is currently under the protection of this household. Jun-tae's voice dropped lower. The moment you became associated with me, she became untouchable. Sung-ho knows this. He's already withdrawn his surveillance from the hospital. The implications crashed over Nyara like a wave. He was watching her? He watches everyone I might care about. You don't even know me. I know enough. Jun-tae's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Something that looked almost like respect. You worked 3 jobs while attending community college. You sent 90% of your income home. When your aunt got sick, you didn't pray or hope. You acted. You researched. You fought. And when you had no options left, you got on a plane to a country where you knew no one and spoke none of the language, because someone offered you a chance. He paused. That's not weakness, Miss Brooks. That's what I need beside me when Sung-ho makes his move. Nyara's mind raced. This was insane. Completely insane. Marrying a man older than her father would have been. A man who controlled an empire built on violence and power. A man who'd orchestrated her entire life for the past month like she was a chess piece. I want to see the contract, she said. Min-kyu's eyebrows rose fractionally. Jun-tae's mouth curved. Not quite a smile, but close. Practical, Jun-tae murmured. Good. The contract was 47 pages long. Nyara sat in a private study lined with books in Korean, Japanese, and English, and forced herself to read every word while Jun-tae stood by the window, and Min-kyu prepared tea neither of them would drink. The legalese was dense, but the core terms were clear. Marriage duration, minimum 3 years. Renegotiable upon mutual agreement. Living arrangements, separate bedrooms. No expectation of physical intimacy unless mutually desired. Financial provision. All personal expenses covered. Monthly allowance of $50,000 for discretionary use. Medical care. Full coverage for Nyara and all immediate family members. Education. Any degree program or training fully funded. Termination. Possible after 3 years with a settlement of $5 million. Early termination. Only permissible under specific circumstances. Infidelity, abuse, mutual agreement. Settlement. $2 million. The separate bedrooms clause. Nyara said without looking up. Whose idea was that? Mine, Jun-tae replied. I'm not interested in a child bride, Miss Brooks. I'm interested in an ally. Most men would say that and lie. I'm not most men. Nyara finally looked at him. He met her gaze without flinching, without the predatory gleam she'd learned to recognize in men, who thought youth meant vulnerability. Instead, there was something else, a kind of weary honesty that made her chest ache unexpectedly. If I say no, she asked quietly, your aunt's treatment continues. The debt is forgiven. You return to Baltimore with no obligations. Jun-tae's voice was firm. I won't hold a dying woman hostage, regardless of what you think of me. Then you'd have nothing. I'd find another way. Why give me a choice at all then? Jun-tae turned from the window fully, and for the first time, she saw something like vulnerability in his posture. Because a wife who resents me is useless. A partner who chooses this, even for complicated reasons, is invaluable. Nyara looked down at the contract again. The words blurred. She thought of her Aunt Lorraine, who'd raised her when her parents died, who'd worked double shifts to keep Nyara in school, who'd never once made Nyara feel like a burden, even when they were eating ramen for the fourth night in a row. I want one addition to the contract, Nyara said. Min-kyu paused mid-pour. Jun-tae waited. If you betray me, if you use me as a pawn and discard me, if you hurt my family, if you go back on any of these terms, I get to walk away with $10 million and full immunity from any retaliation. Agreed. The answer came so fast it startled her. Jun-tae crossed the room and took the pen from Min-kyu's hand, then wrote something in Korean at the bottom of the final page before signing his name with swift, decisive strokes. My word legally bound, he said, offering her the pen. Sign or don't. But decide now. The ceremony begins in 90 minutes. Nyara's hand shook as she took the pen. The weight of it felt enormous, like holding a gun or a key or both at once. She thought about her aunt's smile, about the funeral she'd been mentally planning for weeks, about the impossibility of this choice and the impossibility of refusing it. She signed her name. The world didn't end. Thunder didn't crash. The floor didn't open up and swallow her. But something fundamental shifted in the air between them. A door closing on one life and opening onto something she couldn't begin to imagine. Jun-tae nodded once, as if she'd passed some unspoken test. Min-kyu will show you to your quarters. Someone will help you prepare. Prepare for what, exactly? A traditional Korean wedding ceremony, modified for time constraints. He paused at the doorway. And Miss Brooks? When we're in public, you may call me Chairman or Jun-tae SSI. In private, Jun-tae is acceptable. What should I expect you to call me? His eyes met hers one last time before he left. My wife. The door closed. Nyara sat in the sudden silence, pen still in her hand, and wondered if she'd just saved her life or destroyed it. The preparation room was all white silk and cherry blossoms and women who spoke rapid Korean, while measuring Nyara's body like she was a mannequin. The hanbok they dressed her in was breathtaking, layers of crimson and gold, embroidered with symbols she didn't recognize. Someone did her makeup with a careful hand, explaining nothing. Someone else arranged her braids into an elegant updo, weaving in gold thread. Nyara stared at herself in the mirror, and didn't recognize the woman looking back. Beautiful, said a voice behind her in English. Nyara turned to find an elderly woman in a simpler hanbok, her face kind but sharp. I am Mrs. Choi, head of household. Is that like a housekeeper? It means I run everything the chairman doesn't notice. Mrs. Choi smiled faintly. I wanted to meet you before the ceremony. To tell you something. What? You're the first person who ever told him no. Mrs. Choi's eyes glimmered with something like amusement. When he first mentioned you, Min-kyu asked if you'd accepted. The chairman said. She told me to explain myself. No one has done that in 15 years. Nyara's throat tightened. He admires me telling him no. So he backed me into a corner where I couldn't refuse? He admires that you're still fighting. Even now. Mrs. Choi patted Nyara's hand. Survive tonight. The rest will follow. Before Nyara could respond, someone called out in Korean. Mrs. Choi squeezed her hand once more and left. Nyara was alone with her reflection again. A stranger in silk, about to marry a man she'd met 2 hours ago. The ceremony was smaller than she'd expected but more intense. A private room in the estate's east wing, decorated with traditional symbols and modern security cameras. Fewer than 20 people in attendance. All family or high-ranking associates, their faces carved from stone. No warmth. No joy. Just witnesses to a transaction. Jun-tae stood at the center in formal hanbok, black and silver, looking like something out of a historical drama, except for the Patek Philippe watch glinting at his wrist and the cold authority in his stance. When Nyara entered, every eye turned. She felt their assessment like physical weight, calculating her worth, her threat level, her weaknesses. She lifted her chin and walked forward. The officiant spoke in Korean. Nyara understood nothing except her own name and Jun-tae's. There was bowing. There was an exchange of cups filled with something that tasted like sweet rice wine. There was a moment when Jun-tae took her hand, his grip warm and steady, and spoke words she couldn't translate but felt in her bones. Then it was over. You're married, Min-kyu murmured beside her. Legally binding in both South Korea and the United States as of 3 minutes ago. Nyara looked at Jun-tae. He looked back. Between them stretched an impossible distance that had nothing to do with the 3 feet of space separating their bodies. Congratulations, someone said in accented English. A younger man, late 30s, handsome in a cruel way, approached with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Uncle. And bride. Sung-ho. Jun-tae's voice dropped several degrees. You weren't invited. Family doesn't need invitations. Sung-ho's gaze slid to Nyara, assessing and dismissive. So this is the solution? An American girl young enough to be your granddaughter. Watch your tone, Jun-tae said quietly. Or what? You'll. Sung-ho stopped himself, but the threat hung in the air. Then he smiled again, wider. She's very pretty, uncle. I'm sure she'll be comfortable here. The emphasis on the last word made Nyara's skin crawl. Jun-tae must have sensed it because he moved, just half a step, but suddenly he was between her and Sung-ho, blocking the younger man's view. Leave, Jun-tae said. Not loud. Not angry. Absolute. Sung-ho held his ground for 3 long seconds. Then he bowed mockingly and walked away, but not before throwing one more look at Nyara. A promise of future confrontation. That's your nephew? Nyara asked when they were alone again. Unfortunately, he's going to be a problem. He already is. Jun-tae turned to her. But that's my concern. Tonight you rest. Tomorrow, we begin teaching you how to survive in this world. They walked through hallways that seemed to go on forever, guards posted at intervals, cameras hidden in crown molding. Finally, Jun-tae stopped at a door. Your quarters, he said, opening it. The room beyond was larger than Nyara's entire apartment back home. King-sized bed with silk sheets. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking gardens lit by subtle lighting. A bathroom with a tub that could fit 3 people. Everything expensive. Everything elegant. Everything a cage. I'm across the hall, Jun-tae continued. If you need anything, there's a phone by the bed. Dial 1 for Mrs. Choi, 2 for security, 3 for me. Nyara stepped inside, feeling unmoored. Do people actually use 3? No one has yet. She turned to face him. He stood in the doorway, this man who was now legally her husband, and for a moment neither of them spoke. The weight of what they'd just done settled between them like a living thing. Why did you really choose me? Nyara asked. The truth this time. Jun-tae was quiet for a long moment. Then, because when Min-kyu showed me your file, the first thing I noticed wasn't your age or your appearance or your circumstances. It was a note from the investigator. It said, subject has rejected 4 marriage proposals in the past 3 years. When asked why, she said she refuses to be saved by a man. She'll save herself. He met her eyes. I needed someone who wouldn't crumble under pressure. Someone who'd fight even when fighting seemed impossible. I needed someone like you. Before Nyara could respond, he stepped back and closed the door. She stood alone in her gilded prison and finally, let herself shake. Nyara didn't sleep. How could she? Every time she closed her eyes, the day replayed. The contract, the ceremony, Sung-ho's predatory smile, Jun-tae's unreadable expression. At 3 a.m., she gave up and explored the room, finding a closet full of clothes in her exact size. Of course they'd measured her. A desk with a laptop, password protected, and a bookshelf with English titles ranging from Korean history to business strategy to inexplicably, Toni Morrison. She pulled out Beloved and sat by the window, reading words that felt like home while Seoul glittered below her like a circuit board. Dawn came gray and cold. Someone knocked softly. Yes. Nyara called. Mrs. Choi entered with a tray of food, rice soup, banchan tea. The chairman requests your presence at breakfast in 1 hour. Until then eat. Keep your strength. Is that an order? It's advice. Mrs. Choi's expression softened. He won't hurt you. But this world will try to. Eat. The breakfast room was smaller than Nyara expected, intimate almost. Jun-tae sat at the head of a table set for 2, reading something on a tablet. He wore a simple black turtleneck and slacks, looking less like a crime lord and more like a professor. The cognitive dissonance was dizzying. Sit, he said without looking up. Nyara sat. Food was already plated. Western-style breakfast, like someone had anticipated her preferences. Coffee, eggs, toast, orange juice. We begin your education today, Jun-tae said, setting down the tablet. Korean language lessons. 3 hours daily. Cultural etiquette. 1 hour. Media training. 2 hours. Security protocols. I need to call my aunt, Nyara interrupted. Jun-tae paused, then nodded. After breakfast. Secure line. You can speak freely but don't mention the circumstances of our marriage. Tell her you've found work. Tell her you're safe. What if she asks about you? Tell her the truth. You married someone who can protect her. They ate in silence. Jun-tae's phone buzzed multiple times, but he ignored it. Finally, Nyara couldn't hold back anymore. Last night, you said separate bedrooms. No expectations. Yes. But people will expect. What people expect is irrelevant. Jun-tae's eyes met hers. I made a commitment. I keep my commitments. Even if it's inconvenient? Especially then. Something in Nyara's chest loosened fractionally. Not trust. Not yet. But maybe the beginning of something like it. The phone call with her aunt lasted 20 minutes and broke Nyara's heart 3 times over. Aunt Lorraine cried, from relief, from fear, from confusion. She kept asking if Nyara was okay, if she was safe, if this was real. Nyara lied with a steady voice and said everything was fine. Perfect, even. She'd found a good job. She'd met someone. Everything was going to be okay. You sound different, baby, Aunt Lorraine said softly. I'm just tired. No. You sound older. Nyara closed her eyes. I'm fine, Auntie. I promise. Just focus on getting better. I love you so much. I love you too. When Nyara hung up, she found Jun-tae standing in the doorway. She had no idea how long he'd been there. She's doing well, he said. Dr. Han reports significant progress. Thank you, Nyara whispered. Don't thank me. You paid the price. Before she could respond, Min-kyu appeared. Sir, Sung-ho has called a family meeting. Tonight. Jun-tae's expression didn't change, but something dangerous flickered in his eyes. What's the stated purpose? Discussing succession protocols. He's moving faster than expected. Jun-tae looked at Nyara. You'll need to attend. What? Why? Because my wife's absence would signal weakness. And weakness invites attack. The family meeting took place in a conference room that looked like it belonged in a Fortune 500 company. Glass walls, leather chairs, screens displaying financial data. 20 people arranged around a massive table. All eyes on Nyara as she entered beside Jun-tae. Sung-ho sat at the far end, looking smug. Uncle, he said pleasantly. And the new Mrs. Baek. How lovely. Jun-tae took his seat. Nyara sat beside him, feeling every gaze like a brand. Let's begin, Jun-tae said. What followed was an hour of corporate warfare disguised as polite discussion. Sung-ho presented proposals for restructuring the company, expanding into new markets, modernizing operations, all reasonable on the surface but clearly designed to diminish Jun-tae's direct control. Others chimed in, some supporting Sung-ho, others remaining carefully neutral. Jun-tae countered each point with devastating precision. But Nyara could see the arithmetic shifting. Sung-ho had more support than Jun-tae had anticipated. Then Sung-ho made his mistake. Of course, with the chairman's recent, personal changes, perhaps it's time to consider whether his judgment remains sound. The room went quiet. Explain, Jun-tae said softly. A 61-year-old man marrying a 20-year-old girl he met a month ago? Some might question his decision-making capabilities. Nyara felt every eye turned to her, assessing, judging, dismissing. And something in her snapped. Not the scared girl who'd arrived yesterday. Something older. Something that had survived Baltimore streets and midnight shifts and impossible choices. You're right, Nyara said. Jun-tae's head turned fractionally. Sung-ho smiled. It does seem questionable, Nyara continued. A powerful man making a sudden decision. But let me ask you something, Mr. Baek. How long did it take you to decide to challenge your uncle for control of this company? Sung-ho's smile faltered. Because from where I sit, it looks like you've been planning this for years. Collecting allies. Waiting for an opening. That's patient. Strategic. Some might even call it calculating. Nyara leaned forward slightly. So when a man known for being patient and strategic makes what appears to be an impulsive decision, maybe the question isn't whether his judgment is sound. Maybe the question is what he saw that you missed. The silence that followed was electric. Jun-tae's hand moved, just slightly, and rested on the back of Nyara's chair. Not touching her. Just there. A statement. Meeting adjourned, Jun-tae said. We'll revisit Sung-ho's proposals next quarter. Sung-ho's face had gone red. Uncle. Adjourned. Everyone filed out. Sung-ho lingered, his gaze on Nyara venomous now. Clever girl, he murmured. But cleverness without power is just noise. Then I guess it's good I married power, Nyara replied. After he left, Jun-tae stood. Looked at her. For a long moment he said nothing. Then, that was dangerous. He insulted both of us. Yes. And you made him look foolish in front of the entire family. He won't forget that. Good, Nyara said. Neither will they. Something flickered across Jun-tae's face, surprise maybe or respect, or something more complicated. Come. We have work to do. The next 3 weeks became a blur of lessons and protocols, and slowly learning to navigate a world that operated on rules she'd never imagined. Korean language tutorials with a patient teacher named Mississippi Park. Etiquette training with Mrs. Choi, who taught her how to bow, how to pour tea, how to read the subtle hierarchies in every interaction. Media coaching with a former journalist who drilled her on what to say, what not to say, how to smile for cameras. And through it all, Jun-tae's presence, constant but distant. He ate breakfast with her daily, checked on her progress, answered her questions with surprising patience. But he never touched her, never crossed the invisible line he'd drawn between them. Nyara told herself she was grateful for that. She was lying. It started small. Jun-tae's hand steadying her elbow when she stumbled in heels she wasn't used to. The way his eyes tracked her across a room during a formal dinner, protective and assessing. The night she couldn't sleep and found him in the library at 2 a.m. And they talked about nothing important until dawn while rain fell outside. Why aren't you married already? Nyara asked during one of those late nights. You're successful, powerful. You could have had anyone. I was, Jun-tae said quietly. 20 years ago. She died in a car accident. Nyara's breath caught. I'm sorry. It was a long time ago. But you still miss her. Every day. He looked at Nyara then, and something in his expression made her chest ache. She would have liked you. She had the same fire. Did you love her? Completely. Then this must be complicated. Jun-tae smiled faintly. Yes. But life is always complicated. Nyara wanted to ask more, but something stopped her. Maybe the vulnerability in his eyes. Maybe her own confused feelings. Instead, she said, teach me something. What? Anything. Something real. Not etiquette or protocols. Something you care about. Jun-tae considered. Then he stood and pulled a book from the shelf. Old leather-bound, pages yellowed. Poetry. Kim Soyeol. He wrote about loss and longing better than anyone. He opened to a page and read in Korean first, his voice low and musical, then translated. My love has left me, but I did not shed tears. At Yaksen in Yongbyon, where azaleas bloom, I gathered flowers and spread them on your path. The words hit Nyara like a physical thing. Not because she understood the cultural context. Because she heard the ache in Jun-tae's voice. The years of loss he carried. It's beautiful, she whispered. It's about letting go of what you cannot keep. Their eyes met. Held. And for one electric moment, Nyara thought he might reach for her. Thought she might let him. Then Jun-tae closed the book. It's late. You should rest. Right. Yes. Nyara stood quickly. Good night. Good night, Nyara. He'd used her first name. No honorifique. Just her name. She lay awake for hours, turning that moment over and over in her mind. The attraction was becoming a problem. Nyara noticed it first in small things. The way her pulse jumped when Jun-tae entered a room. How she'd started timing her mornings to coincide with breakfast. The night she passed his bedroom and paused, wondering what it would be like to knock. To cross that line. She told herself it was gratitude. Proximity. Stockholm Syndrome maybe. Anything except the truth. That she was developing real feelings for a man 41 years her senior. A man who'd bought her like a business asset. A man who probably saw her as nothing more than a strategic necessity. But then there were moments that made her wonder if she was alone in this. The formal dinner where someone made a crude comment in Korean, not realizing Nyara was learning the language. Her comprehension was still limited, but she caught enough. Jun-tae's response was swift and brutal. A single sentence that made the man go pale and leave immediately. What did you say to him? Nyara asked later. That disrespect toward my wife is disrespect toward me. And I've killed men for less. You were joking. Jun-tae's expression didn't change. Was I? The shopping trip where Jun-tae took her to Gangnam, not to tourist traps but to small boutiques where designers knew him by name. He never told her what to buy. Just watched as she explored, and when she hesitated at a price tag, he handed the clerk his card without a word. You don't have to. You're my wife, he said simply. You should have what you want. The night she woke from a nightmare about her aunt dying, and found Jun-tae in her room 20 seconds later, security protocol be damned. He didn't ask questions. Just sat in the chair by her bed until her breathing steadied. How did you know? She asked. I heard you. Your room is across the hall. I'm a light sleeper. But there was something in his voice, something that suggested he'd been lying awake too. Listening. Waiting. The tension built like a slow-burning fuse. And Nyara knew with absolute certainty that something had to break soon. The breaking point came 6 weeks after the wedding, at the annual Baek Jun Foundation Gala. Seoul's elite gathered in glittering formal wear, drinking expensive champagne and pretending their money came from legitimate sources. Nyara wore a black gown that Jun-tae had chosen. Elegant, sophisticated, making her look older than her years. Stay close, he'd instructed before they entered. Smile. Be polite. Don't engage with Sung-ho. But Sung-ho found her anyway, approaching while Jun-tae was cornered by a group of businessmen. Mrs. Baek, Sung-ho said, his smile sharp. You look lovely. Almost like you belong here. Thank you, Nyara replied evenly. I've been curious. What's it like? Being married to a man old enough to remember the Korean War? He wasn't born until after it ended, actually. Still, the age gap must be challenging. In certain respects. The implication was clear. Disgusting. Nyara felt rage flood her system, but she kept her voice level. I wouldn't know. Unlike you, I don't spend my time thinking about my relatives' sex lives. Sung-ho's eyes flashed. Careful. You might have fooled my uncle, but I see exactly what you are. A gold digger who what? Nyara stepped closer, her voice dropping. Who married a powerful man, and made you look stupid in front of your entire family. Is that what bothers you? That I'm smarter than you expected? Or that your uncle values me more than he ever valued you? You little. Jun-tae appeared. Materialized, really, like he'd been summoned by Nyara's rising fury. His hand settled on her lower back, the first time he'd touched her so deliberately in public. Sung-ho, Jun-tae said quietly. Is there a problem? No, uncle. Just getting to know your wife. You've gotten to know her enough. Jun-tae's hand pressed slightly, a subtle signal. Come, Nyara. They're serving dinner. As they walked away, Jun-tae leaned close. What did he say to you? Nothing I couldn't handle. That wasn't my question. Nyara hesitated. Then, quietly. He implied our marriage was sexless. Because of your age. Jun-tae's jaw tightened. He has no right. I know. But it doesn't matter what he thinks. It matters to me. The intensity in his voice made Nyara stumble slightly. Jun-tae caught her elbow, steadying her, and for a moment they stood there in the hallway outside the ballroom. Close enough that Nyara could see the gold flecks in his dark eyes. Why? She breathed. Because you're my wife. And what he suggested dishonors both of us. We both know this isn't a real marriage. don't we? The question hung between them, dangerous and electric. Nyara's pulse hammered in her throat. Jun-tae's hand was still on her elbow, warm through the silk of her gown. And something in his expression had shifted. Cracked, maybe, revealing something raw underneath. We should go inside, Nyara whispered, but she didn't move. Yes. Jun-tae didn't move either. The moment stretched. Nyara became hyper-aware of everything. The subtle scent of his cologne. The way his thumb had started tracing small circles on her inner elbow. The heat radiating from his body. She was 20 years old, and she'd been with exactly 2 men in her life, both forgettable experiences that lasted minutes, and left her wondering what all the fuss was about. But this feeling of being seen, of standing on the edge of something vast and terrifying, this was entirely new. Jun-tae, she started. He stepped back. The moment shattered. Dinner, he said, his voice carefully neutral again. We're late. Nyara wanted to scream. Instead, she smoothed her gown and followed him into the ballroom, feeling like she'd just lost something she'd never actually had. Dinner was excruciating. Nyara sat beside Jun-tae at the head table, smiling and nodding through conversations in Korean that she understood about 60% of. Jun-tae's hand rested on the table between them, close enough to touch but carefully not touching. The space felt deliberate. Punishing. Across the room, Sung-ho watched them with calculating eyes. After dinner came speeches, donations, the performative charity that made wealthy people feel good about themselves. Nyara barely listened. Her mind kept replaying that moment in the hallway, don't we? Wondering what would have happened if she'd been brave enough to answer. Dance with me, Jun-tae said suddenly. Nyara blinked. What? It's traditional. The foundation president dances with his wife. Jun-tae stood and offered his hand. Unless you'd prefer not to. Every eye in the ballroom had turned to them. Refusing would create gossip. Speculation. Exactly what Jun-tae was trying to avoid. Nyara took his hand. The dance floor was crowded, but somehow they found space. Jun-tae's hand settling at her waist, Nyara's hand on his shoulder. The orchestra played something slow and classical. Nyara didn't recognize it, but it felt old, romantic, weighted with history. I don't really know how to do this, Nyara admitted as they began to move. Follow my lead. Trust me. And somehow, impossibly, she did. Jun-tae guided her through the steps with gentle pressure, his body close enough that she could feel the heat of him, smell the subtle scent of his cologne mixing with something uniquely him. They moved together with an ease that felt wrong given they'd never danced before. Never even stood this close. You're good at this, Nyara said after a minute. My wife, my first wife, loved to dance. She made me take lessons. Jun-tae's voice was soft, almost wistful. I hated it at first. But she had a way of making everything lighter. You must have loved her very much. I did. Do you? Nyara hesitated. Do you think you could ever? I mean, do you think you'll ever love again? Jun-tae's eyes met hers. I didn't think so. For 20 years, I was certain that part of my life was finished. The past tense of that statement made Nyara's chest tighten. What changed? Jun-tae's hand at her waist pressed slightly, drawing her fractionally closer. I met someone who reminded me what it felt like to be surprised, to be challenged, to want. He trailed off, his gaze dropping to her lips for just a second before returning to her eyes. To want things I'd convinced myself I was too old to desire. Nyara forgot how to breathe. The ballroom, the music, the hundreds of watching eyes. All of it faded until there was only Jun-tae's face, the intensity in his expression, the terrible, wonderful possibility hanging between them. Jun-tae, she whispered. The music ended. Applause rippled through the room. The spell broke. Jun-tae stepped back, his expression smoothing into polite neutrality. So quickly Nyara wondered if she'd imagined the whole thing. Thank you for the dance, Mrs. Baek. The formality stung. Nyara nodded, not trusting her voice, and let him escort her back to their table. But under the table, hidden from view, Jun-tae's hand found hers. Just for a moment. Just long enough to squeeze gently before letting go. Nyara spent the rest of the gala in a daze of confusion and want. When they finally returned to the estate, it was past midnight. Jun-tae walked her to her door, their nightly routine, and paused. You handled tonight well, he said. Sung-ho tried to rattle you. You didn't let him. I'm getting better at this. The whole being your wife thing. You are. Jun-tae's hand came up, like he might touch her face, then fell back to his side. Good night, Nyara. She should let him go. Should say goodnight and close the door and preserve the careful distance they'd maintained for 6 weeks. Should be smart. Instead, she said, Why are you afraid of me? Jun-tae went very still. I'm not afraid of you. Yes, you are. Every time we get close to something real, you pull away. Like tonight. In the hallway. On the dance floor. Nyara stepped closer. What are you so afraid of? Nyara, you should go inside. That's not an answer. It's the only answer you're going to get tonight. Why? Because you're older? Because you think wanting me makes you some kind of predator? Nyara's voice rose despite her best efforts. I'm 20, not 12. I can make my own decisions. This isn't about your age. Then what is it about? Jun-tae's control finally cracked. It's about the fact that I bought you. The words came out harsh, almost angry. I manipulated your life, put you in an impossible situation, and made you sign a contract that bound you to me. You think I don't know what that makes me? You think I don't lie awake at night wondering if every kind word you say, every smile you give me, is real or just survival instinct? Nyara stared at him. You think I'm pretending? I think you're adapting. As any intelligent person would. Jun-tae's jaw clenched. And I refuse, to take advantage of that. To let this power dynamic become something else. You deserve better. You don't get to decide what I deserve. Someone has to. Because you're 20 years old and you've been here 6 weeks and you have no idea. He stopped himself, breathing hard. No idea what? Nyara demanded. That I'm developing feelings for you? That sometimes I lie awake wondering what would happen if I crossed that hall? That when you touch me, even accidentally, it feels like... She broke off, heat flooding her face. Jun-tae's expression had gone completely still. Stop. Why? You asked for honesty in this marriage. I'm being honest. Nyara. Her name came out rough, almost desperate. You don't know what you're saying. Yes, I do. And you know what the worst part is? I think you feel it too. I think that's why you're so scared. Nyara took another step forward. They were inches apart now, close enough that she could see his pulse jumping in his throat. I think you're terrified because this wasn't supposed to be real. I was supposed to be a chess piece. A business arrangement. Not someone who makes you feel things you thought you'd buried 20 years ago. Even if that were true, and I'm not saying it is, acting on it would be profoundly wrong. Why? Because you're older? Because the circumstances aren't perfect. Nyara laughed bitterly. Nothing about this is perfect. Nothing about us makes sense. But it's real. And you're too much of a coward to admit it. Jun-tae's hand shot out, gripping her wrist, not hard, but firm. His eyes blazed. You want to know the truth? Fine. Yes. I lie awake thinking about you. Yes, I find excuses to see you during the day. Yes, when you smile at something I've said, it feels like sunlight after years of winter. But those feelings don't give me the right to act on them. Because at the end of the day, you're here because I gave you no other choice. And until you have real freedom, until you can walk away without consequences, anything between us would be tainted by that. The confession hung in the air, raw and honest and terrible. What if I don't want to walk away? Nyara whispered. You don't know that yet. You might in a year. In 2 years. When the novelty wears off and you realize what you've sacrificed. Jun-tae released her wrist. I won't risk hurting you that way. I won't become another man who took something from you without permission. Tears pricked Nyara's eyes. Not from sadness. From frustration. From the unfairness of finally wanting something, someone, and being told it was impossible for her own good. You're wrong, she said. About what I want. About what I'm capable of choosing. But I can't make you believe that. No. You can't. Nyara nodded slowly. Then she stepped back and opened her door. Good night, Chairman Baek. The formal title was deliberate. A wall going back up. Jun-tae flinched but didn't correct her. Good night. Nyara closed the door and leaned against it, listening to Jun-tae's footsteps cross the hall. His door opened, closed, and then silence. She slid down to the floor and let herself cry for the first time since arriving in Seoul. Not from fear or despair, from wanting something she couldn't have and hating Jun-tae a little bit for being too noble, too careful, too good to just let himself feel. Across the hall, Jun-tae sat on the edge of his bed with his head in his hands, fighting every instinct that screamed at him to cross back over, to knock on her door, to damn the consequences and just take what he wanted for once in his careful, controlled life. But he didn't. Because he was 61 years old, and he'd lived long enough to know that desire without ethics was just another form of violence. And he'd already taken so much from Nyara. He wouldn't take this too, even if it killed him. The next morning, Jun-tae didn't come to breakfast. Min-kyu delivered a message. Urgent business meeting. Apologize for the inconvenience. Please continue with scheduled lessons. Nyara knew avoidance when she saw it. She threw herself into her studies with renewed intensity. Korean language lessons with Mississippi Park, who seemed to sense Nyara's mood and pushed her harder than usual. Etiquette training with Mrs. Choi, who taught her the subtle art of reading a room, of knowing when to speak and when silence was power. Security protocols with a stone-faced man named Officer Kong, who made her memorize exit routes and safe rooms, and what to do if someone tried to take her. Do you really think someone would try? Nyara asked. You're married to Chairman Baek, Kong replied. You're a target by definition. It should have scared her. Instead, it just made her angry. At Jun-tae for pulling her into this world. At herself for starting to care about him. At the whole impossible situation. 3 days passed. Jun-tae remained conspicuously absent, communicating only through Min-kyu or brief, formal notes left on her breakfast tray. Meeting in Busan. Back Thursday. Negotiations running long. Don't wait up. Each note was a small rejection. A reminder that whatever had sparked between them was being deliberately extinguished. On the 4th night, Nyara decided she was done waiting. She found Mrs. Choi in the kitchen, overseeing dinner preparations. Where is he really? Mrs. Choi didn't pretend not to understand. His office. East Wing, 3rd floor. Is he alone? Min-kyu left an hour ago. Nyara nodded and headed for the stairs before she could talk herself out of it. The East Wing was quieter, darker. Jun-tae's office door was closed but not locked. She knocked once, then entered without waiting for permission. Jun-tae sat behind a massive desk, shirt sleeves rolled up, tie loosened, papers and tablets scattered around him. He looked up when she entered, surprise flashing across his face before he could mask it. Nyara. It's late. You've been avoiding me. I've been busy. You've been hiding. Nyara closed the door behind her. We need to talk. There's nothing to talk about. Really? Because 4 nights ago you told me you think about me, that I feel like sunlight, and then you disappeared for 4 days like a coward. Jun-tae's jaw tightened. I explained my position. Your position is bullshit. Nyara crossed the room until she stood in front of his desk. You're hiding behind ethics and age gaps and power dynamics because you're scared. Not of hurting me. Of feeling something you can't control. Even if that's true. It is true. And you know what? I'm scared too. I'm terrified. Because falling for you makes no sense. You're 41 years older than me. You manipulated my life. You're dangerous and powerful and completely wrong for me in every logical way. Nyara's voice cracked. But logic doesn't change how I feel when you walk into a room. It doesn't change the fact that I've never felt safer or more seen than when I'm with you. And it doesn't change the fact that pushing me away isn't protecting me, it's hurting both of us. Jun-tae stood slowly, moving around the desk. You think I don't know that? You think I don't feel it too? But wanting something doesn't make it right. And denying what we both feel doesn't make it wrong. They stood 3 feet apart. The tension was suffocating. What do you want from me? Jun-tae asked quietly. Honesty. No more walls. No more protecting me from myself. Nyara took a breath. Tell me you don't want me. Tell me what happened at the gala meant nothing. Tell me I'm imagining this. And I'll believe you. I'll stop pushing. But you have to say it. Jun-tae's hands clenched at his sides. I can't. Can't what? Can't lie or can't tell the truth. Both. The word came out tortured. Nyara, I'm 61 years old. I've built an empire on control, on always knowing the right move, on never letting emotion dictate strategy. And then you walked into my life and dismantled everything I thought I understood about myself. You make me feel young and foolish and reckless. You make me want things I have no right to want. Like what? Jun-tae moved closer. Close enough now that Nyara had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. Like touching you. Tasting you. Hearing my name on your lips when you. He stopped, breathing hard. This is inappropriate. It stopped being inappropriate the moment you married me. That's not. Nyara reached up and touched his face. Just her fingertips against his jaw, feeling the slight stubble there, the warmth of his skin. Jun-tae went absolutely still, like she'd pressed a knife to his throat instead of offering a caress. Tell me to stop, she whispered. If you don't want this, tell me to stop. Nyoro. Her name came out broken. You don't understand what you're asking for. Then show me. Something in Jun-tae's control finally, irreversibly snapped. His hand came up to cup her face, thumb brushing her cheekbone with devastating gentleness. If we cross this line, he said roughly, there's no going back. No pretending this is just a business arrangement. No easy exit when you realize what you've committed to. I'm not asking for easy. I'm asking for real. Jun-tae searched her face for a long moment. Looking for doubt maybe. For fear. For any excuse to stop this before it started. He found none. God help me, he breathed. And then he kissed her. It wasn't gentle. Wasn't the careful, respectful kiss of a man afraid to take too much. It was raw and desperate, and 20 years of loneliness poured into a single moment. Jun-tae's mouth moved over hers like he was drowning and she was air, his other hand sliding into her hair, angling her head so he could deepen the kiss. Nyara's knees went weak. She gripped his shirt to stay upright, kissing him back with equal desperation. This was nothing like the fumbling experiences of her past. This was want made physical, need translated into touch. Jun-tae broke the kiss, breathing hard, his forehead pressed to hers. We should stop. Why? Because if we don't stop now, I won't be able to. Good. He pulled back to look at her, and Nyara saw something new in his expression. Hunger, yes, but also wonder. Like he couldn't quite believe this was happening. You're sure? He asked. I've never been more sure of anything. Jun-tae's hand slid down her spine, pulling her flush against him. Nyara gasped at the contact. The solid warmth of his body, the evidence of his desire, the way he held her like she was both precious and necessary. Then let me take you somewhere more comfortable, he murmured against her ear. Because when I make love to my wife for the first time, it won't be bent over a desk like some rushed transaction. The promise in those words made heat pool low in Nyara's belly. She nodded, not trusting her voice. Jun-tae took her hand and led her out of the office, through quiet hallways, past her room and his, to a part of the estate she'd never been. A private wing that Mrs. Choi had mentioned once but never explained. Jun-tae opened a door to reveal a suite even larger than Nyara's quarters, decorated in dark woods and soft lighting, dominated by a massive bed. My private rooms, Jun-tae explained. No staff. No cameras. No one but us. He turned to her, and suddenly the urgency from the office had transformed into something slower, more deliberate. Jun-tae approached like she was something wild that might spook. His hands settled on her waist. Last chance, he said quietly. Walk away now, and we pretend this never happened. I'm not walking away. Then tell me what you want. Nyara met his eyes. You. All of you. No more holding back. Jun-tae's hands tightened fractionally. Then he smiled, a real smile, unguarded and almost boyish. You have no idea what you've unleashed. He kissed her again, slower this time but no less intense. His hands mapped her body through her clothes, learning the curve of her waist, the dip of her spine. When he found the zipper of her dress, he paused. May I? The fact that he asked, that even now, even after everything, he wanted explicit permission, made Nyara's heart clench. Yes. The dress pulled at her feet. Jun-tae stepped back to look at her, his gaze traveling over her body with an intensity that should have made her self-conscious. Instead, Nyara felt powerful, desired, seen. Beautiful, Jun-tae murmured. God, Nyara, he shook his head, apparently beyond words. Your turn, Nyara said, emboldened by the want in his eyes. Jun-tae's smile turned wicked. He unbuttoned his shirt with deliberate slowness, revealing a body that shouldn't look that good at 61. Lean muscle, a few scars, silver hair across his chest. Evidence of a life lived. When he stood before her in just his slacks, Nyara reached out to touch, tracing the line of a scar along his ribs. Knife fight, Jun-tae said. 20 years ago. Stupid and avoidable. Does it hurt? Not anymore. Nyara leaned forward and kissed the scar. Felt Jun-tae's sharp intake of breath, the way his hands came up to tangle in her hair. Bed, he said roughly. Now. They fell onto the mattress together, a tangle of limbs and desperate kisses. Jun-tae took his time, mapping her body with his hands and mouth, finding sensitive spots that made her gasp, learning what made her arch into his touch. And when he finally settled between her thighs, when he looked up at her with eyes dark with desire, and asked one more time, "Are you sure?" Nyara pulled him up and kissed him with everything she had. "Make me yours," she whispered against his mouth. So he did. If you made it this far, drop a comment below, and let me know what you think happens next. Does Sung-ho find out? Does their secret stay hidden? And don't forget to subscribe because this story is far from over. Later, much later, Nyara lay in Jun-tae's arms, her head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat slow back to normal. His fingers traced lazy patterns on her shoulder. Regrets? He asked quietly. None. I should say yes. Tell you this was a mistake. Jun-tae pressed a kiss to her hair. But I've never been good at lying to you. Nyara smiled against his skin. So what now? Now we figure out how to make this work. How to be husband and wife in every sense, not just on paper. He paused. It won't be easy. Sung-ho will use this against us if he finds out. The family will have opinions. The media. I don't care what they think. I know. That's one of the things Jun-tae stopped himself. Nyara lifted her head to look at him. One of the things you what? Jun-tae met her eyes. One of the things I love about you. The word hung between them. Huge, terrifying, real. You love me. Nyara whispered. I do. God help me, I do. Jun-tae cupped her face. I know it's too soon. I know the circumstances are impossible. But yes. I love you, Nyara Brooks. And I will spend however long you'll let me proving that this wasn't just manipulation or convenience. That what I feel for you is. Nyara kissed him. Soft and sweet and certain. I love you too. Jun-tae's eyes closed. When he opened them again, they were bright. You don't have to say that. I'm not saying it because I have to. I'm saying it because it's true. I love you, Jun-tae. Even though it's complicated and messy, and probably a little bit crazy. More than a little bit. They both laughed, and it felt like healing. Like something broken finally being mended. Jun-tae pulled her close again. Stay with me tonight. Here. In this room. Mrs. Choi is going to know. Mrs. Choi already knows. She always knows everything. Jun-tae sounded resigned but amused. But she's discreet. And loyal. We'll be fine. Nyara settled back against his chest, feeling safer and more content than she had in months. Maybe in years. What happens tomorrow? Tomorrow, we keep pretending nothing has changed. We maintain the public facade. And in private, Jun-tae's hand slid down her spine, promising. In private, I make up for 6 weeks of restraint. Heat flooded through Nyara's body. Is that a threat or a promise? Both. She laughed and kissed him again. And they spent the rest of the night proving that sometimes, the most unlikely love stories were the ones that mattered most. But outside Jun-tae's private wing, in the shadows of the estate, someone watched. Someone who'd noticed the chairman's wife heading toward the east wing, and never emerging. Someone who understood the implications, and the potential leverage such information could provide. Sung-ho smiled in the darkness and pulled out his phone. The real war was just beginning. Hit that subscribe button to subscribe to Afro-Korean Story Vault, and turn on notification to know when new videos are released.